Hare, would you like to, your camera's off.
I see her.
Can you see me and hear me?
I can hear you, but we
I can
can't
s-
see you
Yeah, I
anymore.
can see you also.
I
John, there's
I
two
can see
pages
us.
I can see her.
sometimes.
Oh, interesting.
There's
Well-
two pages, John. They might. On mine, anyway.
Yeah, I keep having people cycle in and out on the video. Ever,
You
Good
can
old
change your
Microsoft.
view if up on the top of the screen there's a view button. You could change it. It might be a different setting. That's why you're not seeing everybody.
well, no, I'm just seeing a square, just no person in it.
Oh, okay.
It's ever since they told me I had to update their bloody software,
Mm.
it hasn't worked right.
Mhm.
Okay, Robert is, I believe, standing in the court. You can swear in Sohair.
Yes, Ms. Omar, do you solemnly swear or solemnly and sincerely affirm, as the case may be, that you will faithfully discharge, according to law, your duties as a public member of the State Board of Accountancy to the best of your abilities, so help you God, or upon penalty of perjury?
Yes, I do.
Welcome to the board.
Welcome.
you.
Yes,
Welcome.
and if
Welcome.
you could just say a few words about yourself, since we're in Hollywood Squares here and we can't have informally met before the meeting.
Certainly. So again, my name is Sohair Omer. I currently serve as a director of institutional research and a lecturer on statistics at Connecticut State Community College, where I also chair the Institutional Review Board. Previously, I worked for the Office of the Governor in the state of Illinois, as well as the Illinois Finance Authority. So I have worked with many CPAs. I'm familiar with the generally accepted accounting principles, GASB and FASB, and other acronyms in the accounting profession. And I look forward to working with you all as a public member on this board to help the CPAs and to protect the consumers in the state of Connecticut. Thank you.
Thank you. Couldn't have
Thank
done
you.
any better. Okay, and we shall start. Um, and just as a setup here, because this is going to be difficult to really run as an organized, that organized, and at certain points, Bonnie will have to, as a non-member, chip in. But there's significant changes coming up, as everybody knows, required to attain a CPA license, and also for mobility. Because Connecticut takes an excessive amount of time, and in fact, we do hold the record for being the longest amount of time it takes for a state to enact a regulation in the United States, and we usually take the prize for the last one to get everything done. The Connecticut Society has elected to try to get the process in the queue for the legislative process and get that started as soon as possible. And wishes a response from us to the degree we can support the effort at this point. And it's not, as usually we're here with a full legal document. And so it's an anticipatory support if warranted. The requested changes are related to proposed changes in the UAA and others, and that reflect not only the change for different pathways for attaining a CPA, but also mobility. And therefore, I think whatever we have to do is looking at the response letters, and Stacy and I haven't finished ours yet. This will be actually part of that program. I'm not totally convinced that what comes out the end of this meat grinder in the changes of the UAA is going to be what we perceive to be now. So whatever the state does to get ahead of that game has to take that into account. The New England states might have had a compact that agrees with this, but I'll tell you, a lot of the other states I've seen have not. So we shall see. Tim might be able to provide some feedback into there. He was on my screen, but
Yeah.
so
Yeah, John, I'm here.
yeah,
Yeah, no, I think it's from when I had
there.
and can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. It was clear, and Robert, I think you were there too at our breakfast breakout in the Northeast region at the annual meeting. Um, the topic of these exposure drafts came up, one on the competency model and then the proposed changes to UAA. And I think the only thing that came out of that was there's inconsistent views among the states. I think generally there are probably more concerns with the changes to this competency model than not. I guess initial reactions from some of the states, and I think some of that's coming through in some of the exposure draft comments that we've seen thus far, and effectively asking NASBA to go back to reconsider what's been proposed. And I think um, obviously the exposure draft deadlines are upcoming in December. Um, Not sure exactly what the remaining responses will be, but I expect they're going to come back and take another stab at something if a majority of people are thinking this competency
Yeah.
model is a little too complex. How do they simplify it? And obviously the states themselves are in the process of kind of looking at what they think is best for them in respect of trying to, let's say, update the considerations for pathways, and then what's the impact on mobility, substantial equivalency, and the sort. So um, certainly a lot of discussion continues on this front. I don't think anyone's landed anywhere.
Right. Um, I think I agree with that. Now, the due dates are the 31st of December, but also the 6th of December. And since they really are interlinked, we're going to try to get the combined, as I think most states have done, in by the 6th of December. So I think you can all expect some email in the next week or so also, um, with final things. But basically, I'm going to say, Bonnie, would you like to start on the pathway first or the current mobility?
I think mobility is more, it's actually more important at this time, just because of the fact that states are going to be doing this piecemeal, and therefore mobility becomes more important. So why don't we start there?
Okay, this is the chart that Bonnie was referring to, which has the current model and the proposed model. Uh, the current model is substantial equivalency. Um, and the proposed model is automatic mobility. And the automatic mobility, by the way, did everybody get that, or is just me? I got it in Rochelle, one of Rochelle's downloads.
I haven't.
Okay.
Yeah, we have it.
Okay, and
Yeah,
I think
I
I
have it.
sent that in that packet, and Michelle opened up the downloads for you. So here is a valid out-of-state license in good standing, CPA exam passed, baccalaureate degree, and 1 year experience. There's no mention of specific courses required, as has been in the past that I see. No fees or notices required. Um, Easier adaptation to changing education models. And one of the biggest education models that will likely be changing is that many universities in the United States are changing from 4 year to 3 year model, which is the equivalent of basically the rest of the world. Um, Jurisdiction disciplinary. Um, Basically, the only question, Bonnie, I had on this, and I think Tim had too, the Connecticut is 1 year. Do we believe 1 year experience is sufficient? Because with this particular background, it's always traditionally been 2 years experience. And Connecticut Board of Accountancy may cancel automatic mobility if a state is not protecting consumers and revoke or suspend a CPA practice privilege. I have no idea how the Connecticut Board of Accountancy would have any way to determine if another state was not protecting the public.
So, in terms of the first statement regarding the 1 year, I'd like
Mhm.
to remind everyone, this is not for licensure in Connecticut. This is the ability to practice. And there is not a single state out there that is looking for less than 2 years, if it's a bachelor's degree, 2 years experience with a bachelor's, or 1 year with a master's, or 1 year with a 150. And that's right now, that currently exists. People in another state that have the 150 that are licensed and 1 year experience do have the ability to have, they do have mobility in our state now. They can't get licensed here, but they have mobility. And that's the same everywhere. It's just kind of like the driver's license example, I believe that Kimberly Scott used when she was talking. Once you get your license in a state, you can drive in any other state, because you depend on that state to say, yes, you've done what you need to put that person on the road. However, if we found that there was another state that wasn't doing that, so say they were giving licenses to 14-year-olds and they were allowed to drive from day one, we may at some point say we don't want the kids from, like ABC state to drive here. I don't think you will ever see that, to be honest, because there is not a single state that is talking about less than 2 years for a bachelor's, less than 1 year for a master's or the 150. And remember that those requirements also exist in order to get your CPA exam. So for in those other states, while you don't see it under the mobility section necessarily, you will see it in their licensure statutes that nobody will have just a bachelor's in 1 year. If somebody did that for some reason, we would know because it would be out there. We would know when they were in the process of trying to propose it. We could raise it, and then you as a board just could vote not to allow mobility for ABC state because they said um, you don't have to have 2 years experience with a bachelor's, and we're not comfortable with that. But if you start laying everything out, you're going to make it more complex, and we're trying to just have that mobility. Be clear that if you're licensed in another state in good standing, and then we put in those extra guardrails that you have a bachelor's degree in the 1 year experience, I think that just makes people more comfortable, and it addresses some of the rumors that were going around that were not true regarding what states we're looking at. So mobility right now, you do have people practicing in our state with only 1 year experience. You do have the bachelor's, but only from the people that passed under the pre-150 rule. This is supposed to be a set that would encompass everybody for mobility. Our licensure rules fall under that pathways proposal we'll discuss, and we do require the 2 years of experience for somebody with a bachelor's.
Hey, John, if I may.
You may, and please,
What?
anybody
Yeah,
comment.
why not go to make the guardrail 2 years of experience with the bachelor's? I don't understand why 1 year. I mean, it's not even a pathway for someone to get licensed in any state where you'd have a bachelor's in 1 year. So why not just make it 2 years? That would still encompass the person with the master's in 1 year.
If you
So
wanted
is
to,
there,
we could do that. The reason
Yeah.
why we were treating each of them separately in terms of education, it's a minimum of a bachelor's. Experience, it's a minimum of 1 year. If you feel more comfortable saying that, laying out the pathways in the mobility section, we can do that. But that's not the model other states are doing. That doesn't mean that we have to follow
Yeah.
the other states, but what is being proposed in most states, and this really started with the California Board of Accountancy, is actually they decided not to add those guardrails. I didn't think you would be comfortable without them, so I put them in because there were some rumors that we weren't going to make people have to go to school. There were rumors that, there wasn't going to need to be any experience. So the model language that had been drafted by the state societies was what you have before you now. If you feel more comfortable actually laying those pathways out, we can do it. It just means that we're going to have to go back and make changes to the regulations and legislation if somebody ends up doing something slightly different, even if it's adequate in your opinion. And that's why we felt that it was easier to keep that section simple and go to the other provision, giving you the right to say estate standards are not sufficient for Connecticut, and just block a state. And then you could let people in individually if they had the criteria you wanted. But you wouldn't have to worry about, if they're licensed in another state right now, they have to have a bachelor's, they have to have 1 year experience, and then possibly more if they don't only have if they only have a bachelor's. So it was just viewed as a simpler way, more transparent, easy for people to understand, and more consistent with the way the rest of the country is moving.
Well, before I respond, I believe, Carla, were you requesting to speak?
Okay, so right now we have the 100. See, I'm so used to thinking of the 150 hours that so right now we have baccalaureate degree and 1 year experience. Is that correct?
The people that passed under the bachelor's degree, so before we adopted 150, it was 120 credit hours plus 2 years experience. Then we modified it, and those people were grandfathered in. But then we said going forward, so there was a safe harbor put in place for them. But going forward, everyone had to have 150 hours, and Connecticut's a little bit different. So I shouldn't have said 120 and 2. Connecticut was 120 and 3. We're only one of now 5 states that do that. The rest of the country has different experience requirements. They have 1 year less. But anyways, we have the 120 and 2 for the people that were grandfathered in, let's say, and then 150 and 1 for the people that passed when we adopted 150. Again, I'm going to say ours is different. We do right now, there's been a move across the country to get away from that model. And most states, I think we're one of 5 that has the 150 and 2 right now. All the other states are 150 and 1.
So that was what Tim was saying. Why not stay with the 2, the bachelor and the 2? Is that what you were saying, Tim?
It was, yeah.
So if we do that, then there should be a more language, and I don't have a problem doing that. But the language I would then propose would be the bachelor's in 2, or the other 2 pathways, the master's or the bachelor's plus 30 and 1, so that you have it the same across, because you're taking the 1 year that applies to the people with greater education. You're taking the 2 years for people that apply to only people with the bachelor's degree of education,
Right.
and applying it to the master's. So I'm fine with modifying the language, but what I would do is I'd put the 3 pathways in the mobility area. It's not, we haven't done that before, but there's no reason we can't.
Well, yeah, I'm not particularly comfortable with the way it's worded. I guess I'm with Tim and Carla there. But I would say that we probably should get away from the hours, because the hours are going to change as the bachelor's degree changes. You've
Yeah.
got half the kids that go to get their bachelor's degree right now are going with advanced credit courses, which means they're getting their bachelor's with fewer than 120 hours. It just seems to me that it's a measure. And then you read all the well, except for North Carolina, get the peon for 150 hours, but most people are saying that the 150-hour rule has been a total disaster. So let's come up with a really complicated thing that comes up to 150 hours. And I just don't understand that.
So the proposal before you would get rid of the hours, with the one exception of, it says that you can have a bachelor's plus 30 for those people who choose not to go the master's route. And I think it doesn't get you to 150 necessarily, because it depends on what school you go to, whether
Right.
you took the 90 or the 120 credit bachelor's degree. But what it does do is for those people that are getting two bachelor's degrees, so one in IT, because we have so many people that are doing the data analytics,
Mhm.
and other things in the IT world, and an accounting degree. Or what UConn and a number of the other schools have now are these certificate programs, and credentialing programs that are extremely popular. And many people that are CPAs are going back and getting them, as well as those individuals that are still in undergraduate school. This way they're getting their 30 by getting a certificate in data analytics or blockchain, or there's a number of things. I'm not up to speed on all of them, but they've been talked about at the UConn advisory board meetings. And George Fusco seems to think that those are working very well. And we know from our members that they like it because they're trying to find people, as those of you who do recruiting know, that have that technology, because so much of what is happening in the world now with the accounting profession is tech related. But everywhere it says 120 or 150 would be switched to either, those three pathways you have, and it would say bachelor's, master's, or a master's plus 30. We don't want to lose the people that are currently in the pipeline, nor do we want to lose those schools that are being creative and giving their people the opportunity to gain these advanced skills that are so desperately needed, particularly on the technology side. But we're also seeing it with economics. And I don't understand how the certificate programs work in that area. I'm not familiar with that at all. When I say certificate, they all have college credit to them. I'm talking about programs that are being offered by places like University of St. Joseph actually has a good one on the blockchain. And UConn's got some great ones all in the IT area. I don't know about the other side. But I agree with you, John. We need to remove 120 and 150 and replace it with bachelor's,
Yeah.
master's. I agree.
And if we're talking bachelor's plus 30, we don't say anything about the 30 hours are in. If I were a candidate, I'd take them in whatever was simplest as possible. If I could get another, could get it done faster and save myself money.
So it's not in that section of the statutes,
Yeah.
but we are keeping all of the experience and education requirements that are currently in the statute, but they don't fall under the section you're looking at. They fall under the section where you have to have them to sit for the CPA exam. So you know how you have that list of courses already? That's where the person's going to have to make sure that,
That's
for
going to
example,
remain.
that's already in place. And so we don't have
Good.
to address that in the section we're in
Okay.
now.
Okay, thank you. That was my concern. Now, the other thing I'll say is this really has nothing to do with my preferences and my theories as to qualifications. This really has to do with, does the board think these activities sufficiently protect the public or improve the protection of the public? So if people can respond to that they, because that's where it is, not what I think about the 150-hour rule, because everybody knows that and nobody cares and nobody should. It's
I had a question, if I may.
certainly.
So Bonnie, thank you so much for the memo and the chart. It says in both documents, the board can automatically cancel mobility if a state is not adequately protecting consumers. How would we be notified that a state is not adequately protecting consumers, or would we have to do our own due diligence?
I would say that it would be your responsibility, but I actually think it's a cakewalk. If we knew that there was another state out there, our professional reputation is on the line. If we have a state that did something that was crazy, we wouldn't want it. We would bring it to your attention. You'd hear about it from NASBA in a heartbeat. They track everything that's going on in every state, as does the AICPA. And I can guarantee you, based on what happened in Minnesota, where they actually had a reasonable proposal, but people weren't there yet, that both the AICPA and NASBA paid for lobbyists to go in and work against the modifications. And we all knew about it literally before the bill ever was raised by the legislature. So in this community, with all the different organizations that are out there tracking things, and the fact that we do have really good communication lines, you would know about that state before it ever went into effect. Because remember, they're going to have to change their regulations, they're going to have to change their legislation. And even though it doesn't take nearly as long as Connecticut, there's not a single state, I believe, that does it. I'm sorry, grabbing my dog so he stops barking. That does it in less than, I believe it's 9 months. Because you have to wait for a legislative cycle, and many states, actually, those that do it via regulations only, still require the public, they follow the Administrative Procedures Act. So it does take 9 months. Ours takes 3 years, theirs takes 9 months. So you have enough notice, is what I'm saying, to be able to act without a problem.
Thank you.
Well, just following up on what Sohair said is, when you're talking about the state not protecting consumers, are you specifically referring to the rules for becoming a CPA, as practicing as a CPA? I mean,
Me or Sarah?
that's for you.
Oh, so where you get that protection is not in this section. Those protections exist in your ability to sit for the exam, those requirements that are laid out in every statute that says that you must have those certain educational requirements. And even under the experience, we've got requirements as to the experience that must be done. People have to sign off on whether or not they believe people have obtained the knowledge they need during that experience. You have to do practice in different areas. You know that better than I do, but you have to spend so many hours in audit, all those different things. Those exist in every state, a little bit differently, but every state has those requirements to be able to sit for the exam. Our mobility section, remember, says you must be a licensed CPA in another state. Also, there's a couple territories that come in, or like the Washington, D.C., I believe Puerto Rico and Guam are all covered under our CPA system. So you have to be in one of those jurisdictions. You have to hold a valid license, and you have to be in good standing. So in order to be a CPA with a valid license and in good standing, you will have had to meet all of the requirements, like a minimum of a bachelor's plus 2 years of experience, or a master's, depending on what their state has done, in one, or 150 in one. You will have had to take the classes required to sit for the exam, and you will have to have met their experience requirements as well. Now, you can sit for the exam before you've met everything, but there are certain classes you must take before you sit, but you can't be awarded that license. So the language in our mobility provision, and the language that exists in every state's CPA, being eligible to get your CPA, is taken care of in that first section surrounding the exam and the credentialing. Our section under mobility is saying if you have that valid license in good standing in another state, and then we add on the additional guardrails. But those other states already have all the same rules we do in terms of the pathways and the experience requirements and the educational classes you have to take. So a lot of, because it's not all in one section of the statutes, you got to look at the others. But to me, it didn't make sense to repeat everything multiple times. I don't think it would ever get through LCO. And Carla knows that better than I do. They're going to just end up, referring to a section of the statutes or whatever, but it's already there. So everything that you've raised as a concern, I believe, is already addressed. And I've gone further to try to make sure that everyone's concerns were addressed, based on the fact that I knew some of you were in that Northeast group, and that's kind of known as the one that went off the rails with all the lobbyists talking or whatever. There was a lot of concerns about some states saying, "Oh, you don't need a bachelor's degree" or whatever. I was not there; I don't know. But when I'd heard different things from people, I thought, we require it anyways in another section, but if we put it here, make you feel a little bit better, it doesn't take up a lot of space, that's fine. But I believe that every single concern you have, we had as well, and it's very well addressed in both existing statutes and what's been proposed for mobility and pathways.
Okay. Does anybody have any further comments or questions about this? Granted, I guess I'm not sure what we're going to be supporting, whether it's going to be a chart or um,
Yeah, John,
whatever.
just to clarify one thing, we're just talking about mobility now because we kind of
We're
slip
just talking
into,
about mobility now.
yeah,
Yeah.
mobility. I mean, I think we're on the right path with mobility. Your point and Tim's point about clarifying the 2 years, and I'm okay with that. I mean, I don't know. I hear you what you're saying, Bonnie, that it may not be necessary to clarify that. It may complicate it, but if Tim, you're particularly close to this. If you think it helps us to put in that 2 years in the mobility part, then I would be in favor of that also.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of tough for me to support that too, but I definitely do. And only because when I read the other things on the pathways, uh, I look at one massive violation of keep it simple, stupid. Um, that's
Yeah.
very complex and very difficult. But I think this could be done with a minimum of issues. But that I think we should have actually a motion of the board before we're done, because I'm just one vote out of what, 9 here.
Yeah, I just had one other follow-up. Bonnie, do we know, the New England states societies are all on board with this? I don't know if the boards of accountancy are also on board with the automatic mobility that's being
So,
proposed. And the other question is, what about like New York?
yep.
Because and then in New Jersey, I understand maybe recently, I'm not sure about automatic mobility. I know they were moving forward on their own with some pathway language, but you have any insight on that, on those states?
Yes. So I can give you the scoop on the Northeast, minus Vermont, because my counterpart there has only been there for a couple of months, so not completely clued in yet. But working our way south up, New Jersey did their Board of Accountancy a few months ago voted to add an additional pathway of 120 and 2. So unfortunately, they did not move to, but there's enough time before it goes through the legislature to change that language. But they voted for adding 120. So they kept 150, added 120, and then they approved automatic mobility. When I say they approved it, this is the State Board of Accountancy. It still has to go through their legislature. But they did that. They were the first of all the states in the Northeast to do that. It's my understanding that if you just dip a little bit, I don't know what Pennsylvania is doing, but Maryland, which tends to be one of the more progressive states, led by Tom Hood for a long time, they are doing the same thing that we are proposing. And it's my understanding that their Board of Accountancy is okay with it so long as they also keep the bachelor's plus 30. Initially, the proposal that came out from many was just to have the master's in 1 and the bachelor's in 2. But a number of states are going back and saying, no, this third way is also important for the reasons I mentioned.
Okay,
New York
can
is a
you
horse of
repeat
a
the third way so I'm losing track of all the ways.
bachelor's plus 30. So it's what we have, but it takes into consideration that some schools may be going to a 90 credit hour bachelor's degree. So the 3 pathways are master's plus 1, bachelor's plus 30 plus 1 year of experience, and then bachelor's plus 2 years of experience. So New York is very different. Their State Board of Accountancy is out of their education department and is usually, it's my understanding, the last to move anywhere. So, and their legislative cycles are different too. So, like we have a 2-year term, we don't have a 2-year cycle with our legislature. Bills die at the end of the year and need to be introduced again in the second year. In New York, they're introduced 1 year and usually not acted upon until the second year at the earliest. And oftentimes, like us, things don't pass the first time you submit it. It takes another term, but their terms are 2 years. So what's happening in New York now is the State Board of Accountancy has not said where they are, but we all expect that they will not be in favor of any changes to start with, getting licensed. Like my counterpart is a CPA in New York and has been a CPA in Maryland for years. And it took him almost 2 years to get his license in the reciprocity in New York. And he knows the way. It's just a very, very different system. So they are moving. The New York Society is actually going to bring forward automatic mobility and alternative pathways, the bachelor's plus two, to their state legislature for 2025 and anticipate the ability to get it passed in that second year, which would be 2026. The rest of the New England states are all meeting with their state boards of accountancy. Yesterday, Massachusetts met and they did not take a formal vote, but were in favor of it and gave their blessing to the Mass CPA to move ahead with what I proposed to you initially, the bachelor's degree, the 1 year of experience, and obviously the key here is having a valid license in good standing in another state. And then the pathways, they're doing the 3 that were proposed to you as well. New Hampshire is totally in line with that. They're doing the same thing. Maine's state board has not yet met, but based on my counterpart, who's a CPA in Maine, she feels that they will not have a problem getting that approved by the State Board of Accountancy as well. Rhode Island is funny. I actually went and met with them in between our last meeting and this one. And one didn't have a quorum there. They only had 3 people show that day, but they want to see what, they understand the need for changes, but the gentleman who is the chair there was concerned by the discussions that were had in the Northeast breakout. So he thought that we were actually opposed. I think there was just a lot of confusion, it sounds like. He thought our state was initially opposed to automatic mobility and to alternative pathways. And I said, I can't tell you they support what we're proposing at this time, but they seem to be open to it and understand that changes need to be made. I can circle back to you after a decision's made. And he said, well, I really care what Massachusetts and Rhode Island and Connecticut do because we're smack dab in between. So yesterday he got word after the meeting, the Mass CPA CEO contacted him to let them know that they were moving forward with that. And I promised to return after we had our meeting. I do believe that Rhode Island will go the same way. Their big concern was what you raised, Tim. And I think that you had mentioned once, Robert, and that was, is there going to be a state that doesn't require you to go to school and you can just pass the CPA exam and take it like they're doing in some states, talking about it with the bar exam. Are they going to not require, any experience? Who are we getting in here? And it was a very short meeting. It was I shouldn't say it was a short meeting. It was the first time they'd been introduced to anything. I'd been asked by my counterpart in Rhode Island to go, but they had not had a meeting for, I think it was 4 or 5 months. So they hadn't had a discussion as a state. They'd only been in these other ones. So at the end of the meeting, you guys know how you felt when I bombarded you with all the information. They had the same thing, but wanted to know more and were open to change. One of the things, and I don't know how this is going to impact them, their staff attorney was very upset that we were seeking changes now because her deadline for submitting legislative changes has already worked. So their system's different. When their state board wants something, I can't remember what they're called, but their equivalent of DCP, it's like some business development regulations or something. They're the ones who actually will submit the legislation and advocate on behalf of the state board. As you know, our state doesn't operate that way. So she was very concerned that she covers 9 boards and was going to be asked to draft all this after her deadline had already passed, et cetera. We did share that it was not necessary to have them do that, that the state societies have gotten together and we are working with 2 law firms that will review whatever we draft to make sure that is drafted properly. And then once you get it to the legislature, the legislative commissioner office cleans up everything. I could give them a perfect bill and there's something there that's got to be changed. So and Rhode Island's the same way. I think every state is like that. So we told them that we could get that drafted and we could advocate for it. And that seemed to ease her concerns a little bit. But I would say that the board members didn't raise the concerns as much as her because of timing. I believe that adding that bachelor's degree and the year of experience, or doing what you're asking and doing the laying out those pathways in the mobility section, would address the only concern I heard other than timing. And I also think
Okay.
because the other states and Rhode Island Society is going to move with the legislation, whether the state board's there or not. I think because everyone's moving as a block, you'll find them jump in quicker. They definitely seem, and I was told this, they're not a state that will ever be the first one out of the block. They always care what Massachusetts and Connecticut are doing. I can understand that because I always care what New York and Massachusetts are doing. That's why for me, even though a number of states are not doing the bachelor's plus 30, I think that's important because we want to hire people from and have them licensed here from New York. They won't be able to be licensed in Connecticut if they're under the New York 150 rule while they're going through the New York schools, if we don't have that third pathway. So that's why I raised it with
Well,
the other states in New England and asked to keep
let's
it.
then move on to the pathways then. 'Cause we've only got 45 minutes left, although we can obviously go over. Um, does anybody, before I speak and maybe Tim speaks, have any comments on the pathways?
This is Pete. I'm trying to understand the pathways with regards to the educational requirements, Bonnie. And in particular, like, what happens with a non-accounting degree and you're adding accounting related courses, like
Me.
how are you defining what that is? And I don't know.
So those are
I guess
defined
they
in the
also-
statute. Those are already there. We are not changing the education requirements in terms of what classes have to be taken or the experience that must take place to get your credential. So if you look at the other section when it talks about the requirements for earning your CPA, when it talks about the classes you must take before you can sit for the exam, those are still exactly in place. So there's no changes there at all. We don't want to change it. And that's what all the New England states are saying. We already have a system in place that people are aware of. It's very transparent because it's laid out in the statute. Let's stick with that. So we actually, I'm going to say this is unfortunate. We probably will have to come back and look at this. And I'll tell you what the schools say to me when I'm meeting with I'm literally meeting with all the universities now, but we require more accounting classes and we specify what they are than most other states. If we end up going to that 90 credit bachelor's in Connecticut ever, we're going to have to make sure that we're not, because we also require, I think, 30 hours in business, general business classes in addition to the accounting ones. So we have to peek at that later. But in terms of what people have to take now, they will have to take those same classes under this new system when it comes to what accounting classes people have to take and the number of business classes people have to take in order to sit for the exam. The one thing we will change is we'll remove that 120, and that will probably be replaced with 90, only because, and that won't happen as quickly. Remember, we're having a delay to the effective date of the pathways because mobility needs to pass in other states to protect people first. And then 1 or 2 years later, the pathways will go into place. So in terms of what classes they have to take, it'd be the exact same requirement that exists now, except for we probably in the next year or two are going to have to tinker with that 120 when you can sit for an exam and switch that number.
I'm assuming what you're proposing now does not need to address specifically more detail or clarification of general experience and competency, which
Our
I
statute
found
goes,
I found a total mess in the
Yeah.
exposure draft, and apparently so did all the states that commented.
I don't think that's going to remain. And no, as was said by actually, I think the gentleman from NASBA, I apologize, I can't remember his name. But he did say you already have competency in your rules now. We're not suggesting we change those.
Okay. Because I found the definition of general experience in the exposure draft was very unclear. And some of
Yeah.
the things that seemed to be included in what you were doing and what people were going to attest to with that horrible form was a disaster. You don't have to respond to that. I was just basically fishing for anybody else who had scanned the documents and might have some thoughts, pro or con, on that. Guess
I'm
not.
going to say, in fairness to NASBA, I think that while they would really like that, they did say, I think this was Stephanie Saunders who said that, and Tim and Robert, you were both there. At the end, because of the amount of NASBA got beat up a lot at the annual meeting. And I'm going to give Stephanie Saunders a lot of credit because she said, I want you to know that we are listening and we will do what members want in the end. I think that it will happen after states already start to pass everything, because so many states have every other year legislative sessions. So if they don't start to move this year, this in 2025, they won't be able to bring it forward until 2026, and the earliest they'll have anything is 2027. But what you said, I do think that you will see changes, not as quickly as we would like, but I do think that NASPA realizes they've got some issues, and I'll leave it at that.
Hey, Bonnie, one question I
Okay.
have on it goes back to the automatic mobility kind of language. Yes, we have built-in competency, expectations and attestation as it relates to that experience. What about another state that doesn't? Let's say if they pass legislation that just says general experience, you can be, really no guardrails, no competency assessment at all. Do we want those CPAs practicing in our state automatically?
They already are. So right now, we do not prohibit any state. We have not barred a single state from mobility here. The difference is that we won't have to go through the substantial equivalency test that really, it always gets approved anyways, because we don't have anyone that doesn't have those rules now. But I will tell you, in the conversations that are taking place, everyone is saying general experience, but people have stuff in their statutes. Some states go further than we do. Some may have a little bit less, but everyone has something. The reason why I think more than anything else, the term general experience is being used is to differentiate it from NASBA's competency-based one. It's not that nobody's looking or anybody's looking not to have competent people. They will still have had to have passed the exam. You've got all those other requirements and meet their own state's experience requirements. But we're trying to make it easier. There's a real problem in particular with lack of auditors in our state. We're not trying to lower the threshold at all, but we know these other states are doing what they need to now. We know that those requirements to actually get your credential are all in existence in everyone's statutes, and nobody's talking about changing them other than possibly switching if they've got, you can't sit till 120, changing that to bachelor's. So if that's the case now where those people are currently coming here, people are not talking about changing that in any manner in terms of the qualifications to sit, with the exception of allowing bachelor's +2 back in. And that's what so many people in our state got their credential under anyways, all those people that are still currently practicing. I don't know what the percentage is of people under the 150 versus the 120 in Connecticut, but I will tell you that it's got to be at least half my members became CPAs under the 120 and 2 rule. So nothing's changing in terms of the experience requirements that are currently in existence. And you're really not granting anybody mobility that doesn't have it now. You're changing the process and you're laying out what's okay for you. And it's if they've got the license in another state, they're in good standing, and then we'll put in the 3 pathways so that you're comfortable with somebody who does have a bachelor's degree having to have 2 years experience. Is that what, does that help?
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, ultimately the whole mobility model had been anchored into substantial equivalency, right? I mean, so um, I think at the end of the day, we're not calling it substantially equivalent, but in effect, we're acknowledging that these other states have the processes in place and the licensing requirements in place that are substantially equivalent,
You're
to
absolutely right.
By
You're absolutely
definition.
right. Because every state has, every, every state except for Hawaii, who has chosen not to do mobility, but they do take advantage of it in other states, has all adopted mobility. And you're right. What you said is exactly true. We're not calling it substantial equivalency now, but we have determined that everyone must have a minimum standard. Yes.
So Bonnie, one question I have in regards to the mobility, and I'm thinking, what would be, how would you picture a person that is licensed in another state and coming into Connecticut to work based on the automatic mobility? Will there be some type of documentation that they fill out and then they receive the license? And automatically receive the license. I'm just thinking about my experience, because I was originally licensed in New York, and then I filled out paperwork in Connecticut, paid a fee and so forth. And then once they verified my credentials, then I was given a Connecticut license to operate in Connecticut. So how would that work under the automatic mobility? What
So
would
anybody
change?
that's coming to live here or their office would be out of here is currently not covered under mobility and would not be covered under automatic mobility. They fall under our reciprocity statute and regulations. So
Gotcha.
they would have to do the same thing you did.
Gotcha. Okay.
So
So
this
it's
really
two
just covers
totally different
people that
things.
are
Okay.
coming to work on an engagement, for example.
Mhm.
Exactly. So for example, our auditor, we could not get a Connecticut auditor for the CTCPA last year. And so we had to go outside to get him. The person that we have is actually from Virginia, did a lot of the state societies. We're his only client in Connecticut. He has to pay the firm license because we don't have firm mobility in Connecticut, but his individual CPAs working on our audit have mobility under our current statutes.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Totally think of something totally different then. Thank you.
No, good question.
Any further questions or comments?
Bonnie, just going back to the education piece or whatever, then I don't understand the purpose of having accounting degree versus non-accounting degree and all of that language in your proposal, just if we're sticking with the hours
So
that are already prescribed. So I guess I'm
thank
just
you for
trying to
raising that. I should have. So initially we were looking closely at what California had written. Their statutes are a little bit differently, so they get into the two things. We're not going to have that language in our bill because adopting um, the because our sitting for the exam piece covers the educational requirements. So originally we were talking about switching it, trying to streamline it. And in the end, we really felt, and this is where all the New England states came back, and actually think this is where most of the states are. We currently have something that works with the educational requirements. It's known. There's going to be enough other changes that people have to get familiar with. So that aspect of our system is not broken. So we don't need to go back and modify it. So I'm not going to go in because it even got more complicated when you looked at who had an accounting degree, because they considered people that had accounting minors as people who had it, people that had accounting in the title, etc. So please ignore that. I think you will actually end up having much the same result without us saying any of that, because we already have the requirement in our being able to sit for the exam, what educational classes must be taken. So we figure again, people know it, they don't have to learn that. If it's already there, let's stick with it. And so that's what everyone in New England's recommending. We stick with our current educational requirements that were already set by the state boards of accountancy and legislatures.
Okay, because I guess that's where it seemed the language
Yeah.
was saying that if you had a minor, and a minor like at UConn you only need 18 credits to get a minor in accounting, which seems, I guess it seemed in conflict with what's,
Yeah.
you know,
And so
24
The-
hours and so forth.
The,
that
the
are
old
common.
language seemed to be quite sufficient, and
Okay.
we seem to have gummed it up with and made it less understandable
Okay.
nationally.
eventually we'll have to tinker with that area, but that doesn't have to be now. And I think it's better on that side of it for us to wait and see where states are going. On what we're talking about now, we now, I think, are up to 37 states that are going with what I've shared with you today, but they may not have the guardrails on their automatic mobility other than having passed a CPA exam. But that's not that's not a concern to us. Um, ours for automatic mobility will have those guardrails. I have to say that things are changing. I'm sorry I did not raise that, and thank you for doing that, Pete. Things have been evolving so quickly. The I'm going to call it the guts of this have not changed at all. I'm going to say really, and I don't think in the 7 years or 8 years I've been at the society in terms of the changes people want to go to, but how things are being phrased and learning the little nuances when it comes to the classes that need to be taken or the experience that needs to be gained in the various states. Um, has shed light on the fact that it's better for each state to keep what they have because it is sufficient. And we may call our class name our class one thing while somebody else calls it something else, and it's the exact same class. Remember, we ran into that problem with something, and NASBA actually worked with us to change the language in the last round of regulations we went through. They said, why don't you remove some of these things here because we named the sections of the CPA exam. And he said, just leave those out because those could change again in 3 years. So I say, let's not get into any more than we already have in that or change the things that we may have to change again in a couple of years. I like the idea of making sure that we've got the standard we need, but with the flexibility that's desired as well. And I think what we've proposed does that, whereas the California could have gotten us into another hole because of the way they word their education stuff.
Okay.
Okay. So now we got to figure out what we can say that's coherently that's going to help here move this process along in terms of crafting a motion.
Do we need a motion, John? Is it,
I think
I mean,
Bonnie
I'm
needs
thinking what
something when she talks
Massachusetts,
to when she talks to the state government to get this in the
Yeah.
pipeline. She needs something to say, hey, I've reviewed this with the board and they're copacetic.
It's the first question I'll be asked. It's hard to get the legislator pay attention to
Their job. I'm sorry.
to our issues because remember out of DCP they have cannabis, they have all these other things, AI, out of general law. AI and cannabis get more attention than anything else. So when I go trotting in, I have to really work to get a bill raised. And being able to say that this is something that the State Board of Accountancy supports and is makes a huge difference in our ability to move. So yes, that's what I'm asking for. May I make a recommendation regarding the motion?
You may.
And Carla, please jump in here because again, you've got more experience in this area than I do. But I would say move to adopt automatic mobility, which includes or which requires the individual to have their CPA license in good standing, as well as one of the 3 pathways on that's as as one of the three pathways that we've discussed today. And I can actually just take those pathways and put them in. It's probably a better way to say that at the end. But you're looking for automatic mobility that requires somebody to have their license in good standing. And then instead of saying bachelor's and one, you're going to actually say a master's in two, a bachelor's plus 30 in one, or a bachelor's in two. You could do that by saying the three pathways discussed, I believe, because it's in here. But Carla, do you think that's a problem? We can't hear you.
Oh, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Whoever's running the meeting should be able to unmute her. if she-
I did
There
it.
we go.
I think if you just say the three pathways, I think for our motion to be most effective, you're going to have to describe them briefly at some level. So it would be a motion to approve proposals for defining the concept of mobility using three proposed pathways of three.
Master's plus one,
Yeah,
bachelor's plus 30 plus one,
yes,
and bachelor's plus two.
yes.
Okay.
Along with the exam.
Okay.
Are we, I
Under-
see heads nodding. Are we feeling by head nods that we're ready for this motion?
I think that's,
That was
Yeah.
my-
I'm
yeah,
ready.
that was the motion, and I think it's the best we can do. I suspect in the future that may change because I think the pathways are, from what I read, the responses, the pathways are going to be modified, but I think they're, I guess, described loosely enough. That's probably not the right word.
Are
that
we,
it,
are we taking what Carla said as a motion? Carla, did you intend to make
I
a
don't know,
motion?
Carla?
Yeah, I thought John was, yes,
Then I will second Carla's motion.
thank you.
Okay. And can we repeat that? I don't know if anybody's, who's taking minutes?
Is,
That'd be me.
okay,
Okay,
did you get it?
So I have that move to adopt automatic mobility, which requires the individual have their CPA license in good standing, as well as meet one of the three pathways discussed.
And list the pathways.
well, we,
No, we,
yeah, I think we have to
got
list those
it,
pathways if you're going to take it to the legislature.
And
yeah,
those
we
pathways are
decided to
master's plus
actually
one.
name the three pathways.
Right.
Oh, I
Yes.
do have the three pathways. I can add that into the motion itself, but it is,
Excellent.
I do have it listed
Great.
as part of the discussion.
Excellent, thank you,
Okay,
Perfect.
excellent. Okay, then we have Carla has forwarded a motion. Do we have a second?
I'm the second, Robert Day.
Ah, the two lawyers. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor?
I,
Oh, please.
Aye.
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 Aye. We can't see everybody, so or I can't see everybody to see hands raised. Is there anybody that abstained or disagreed? Okay, I guess the ayes have it. Very good, I think. I'm gonna, if I can just take everybody's time, because I'm just gonna make some comments on the two exposure drafts, because Stacy and I will be forwarding you some things. Kat's gonna have to tell us how to do that appropriately. Not in a formal meeting like this, but so that it's open, shall we say, to the public. There were some significant comments, and for the two lawyers, I understand that there is, at least in conservative jurisprudence, that you should never you should never find in an opinion more than the question at hand. That if you expand
Yeah.
past the question at hand, what seems to me like the NASPA and the AICPA have run rampant in violation of that, recognizing that that often gets honored in the breach in um, that. But they've got a situation here. How many people have read those other documents, the exposure drafts? Okay, thank you. If the some of the comments seem to be coming back that the competencies are no evidence has been provided the competencies are appropriate. I had a situation where the general experience included business consultancy, and I wondered if everybody would give me their opinion, since consultancy has always been a problem for independence, whether consultancy is really what should be considered in licensure. You don't need a license to consult. You need a license to audit, because audit is something where you're representing the general public, not the client. Consultancy, you're representing the specific business interests of the client. I thought it was excessively complex in writing. I think they got to cut it, but the tracking and reporting were excessive and not simple. And if you took a look at I'm not sure whether the certification form was in the exposure draft itself or whether they had looked elsewhere, but it's really over the top. And North Carolina mentioned that if we were going to be licensing CPAs based on basically grading in various categories by other CPAs, that effectively you've violated the tooth whitening case from North Carolina.
Oh yeah. That.
Huh? Yeah, that one. That it was not, I mean, 2 years of experience is, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Competencies are a problem whereby the profession could end up in great difficulty, not in a situation where it's not necessarily improving the protection of the public. So if everybody could just consider those, there's a couple of things. Yes, Carla.
Well, I just think one thing, if you just use the term business consultancies without accounting business consultancies, I mean, that could be how to increase the morale of your staff by taking more vacations or something. I think that tie back to accounting,
Yeah, no, it just that was under the competencies, right?
Right.
No, I can't remember which they're the I'm afraid I'm getting I get myself confused with these different pathways, but I do think that just take a look at everybody, what they think about whether we're getting too clever by half in this to actually be able to have something that is in fact additive to the protection of the public. And granted, alternative pathways are probably required because a sufficient body of candidates for CPA is necessary for the protection of the public. So anyway, we'll yes, Carla.
Yeah, I have a question. When are you and Stacy gonna you're going to be working with Kat, send some proposals out to us that we're going to
before Thanksgiving, we took our first cut on everything, and I wanted to get some thoughts going here. But she's unable to participate right now until, after the weekend.
Mhm. So it'll be a little bit after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
If we can get something preliminary before Thanksgiving, which would be like Wednesday, and nobody pay attention to it until
Yeah.
after anyway. So, so it's going to be a tight turnaround. But I will say that the comments so far by the state boards that have submitted, I thought were very thoughtful. And unfortunately, they highlighted what they consider, and in some cases, I agree, certain deficiencies in them, but correctable deficiencies.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that. But if anybody, after having read it, has any comments, I would appreciate them now or by email. I guess hearing none, you have what you need, Bonnie?
Unmute.
You're mute. You're on mute.
Sorry. I need you to vote on the pathways. You moved the motion on automatic mobility, but not on the 3 pathways.
Okay. So the 3 pathways are,
Master's +1,
okay,
bachelor's +30 plus 1 year experience, or bachelor's plus 2 years of general experience.
okay, and the 30 can be whatever you want. It could be film studies.
It could be, but you still have to meet the educational requirements that are
Right.
currently under existence.
So we run into the Jack Daly problem. The late Jack Daly had said his a couple of years ago that his finest new hire was taking correspondence courses to get her 30 hours, and said, "What are you taking?" He said, "Film studies." "Why are you taking that?" He says, "Because this is a very demanding profession, and we're in busy season, and I got to take something easy, and it doesn't require anything of substance that'll assist in accounting." And he said, "She's right."
I
So
think
what are we
that
doing?
I think that you will not see that with the 3 pathways because people are not going to spend the money for an extra year of school when they don't have to. The only
Right.
time they're going to spend it is if they want to do something like get their MBA. Many of our people have MBAs. Masters in taxation is another very popular graduate degree. And then, like I said, with the one that seems to be rising, it definitely hasn't taken over, but is becoming more and more popular are those. And I actually don't know that they call them certificate. I think they call them credential programs. But the ones with all of the IT opportunities where if you were an accounting major, you had so many classes that you had to take. You did not necessarily have time to take electives in areas that you would have liked, such as the IT world. And now, with that being one of the categories, in that third test that you can choose from, you get to choose tech, assurance, or tax. It is something that is growing in popularity. So yeah, I would not keep the only
Okay.
reason why I kept that in, though there were several reasons. One was New York, but more importantly than New York, I thought that the way the schools are being innovative with offering valuable short-term credentialing programs that can total up to that 30 hours really makes a lot of sense given the way technology is becoming more and more part of the CPA world and rapidly becoming that. So
Absolutely.
I just,
Well, I won't,
so I don't,
I will not stand in the way of this, because I think it's positive, net. It's a positive
Hmm.
improvement.
it's also another way, just for acknowledgement. We have some firms that can't find everyone they want. We have some firms that are now, I find this very interesting, going and hiring English majors that may have an interest and helping them get their additional credits so they get the accounting ones they need and sit for the exam. And for example, one firm, Anderson Tax, has done very well with that when they've had trouble finding enough accounting majors to recruit.
Well, they've been
People still have to
periodic.
pass.
Yeah, that's been periodically used many times in the past. I can remember back in the 80s, Deloitte did it at one point.
Do they?
Yeah. I remember bringing in English teachers just to teach our college graduates to write intelligibly in their work papers, but
It hasn't changed.
it hasn't changed now. So would anybody like to a motion? I did have one question, which is irrelevant, and it's I couldn't understand why they were pushing for if you had programs, internships for, and you got credits for academic credit, you couldn't also count the hours. I didn't see why it just, but that's just a comment. Carla, you were raising your hand. I think you were going to make a motion.
Yeah, this time I've tried to write part of it down. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The State Board of Accountancy recommends 3 proposed pathways to CPA licensure. You want me to repeat that, Rochelle?
Hope I got it.
Okay. And then it's right. You want me to read them out loud? It's right here in this memo from Bonnie. I'll read them. It's in the memo from Bonnie. Pathway number 1, master's degree, passage of the CPA exam, and 1 year of general experience. Pathway number 2, baccalaureate degree, plus 30 credit hours, passage of the CPA exam, and 1 year of general experience. And pathway number 3, a baccalaureate degree, passage of the CPA exam, and 2 years of general experience.
I believe you got them.
That,
Do we have a second?
I'll
Nobody
second
wants-
it. Second.
Thank you, Bud. Carla has forwarded the motion. Bud has seconded it. Any further questions? Very well. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, any abstain? Motion passes. Would anybody like to make a motion that we adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
I'll
No,
second.
no discussion allowed, and I will just apologize for spending too much time talking in this one. I wanted to get out some of those things, so if I got a response, it helped me with the exposure
No,
draft.
these are important topics. I'm glad we had this meeting.
yes.
I agree.
Yes.
Okay, it is. And unfortunately, I think there's going to be more coming down the road.
Yep.
A busy year or two.
Absolutely.
Okay, we have the motion. All in
Everybody.
favor?
Oh,
Anybody opposed to adjourning right now after an hour and 20 minutes?
Thank you.
The motion says, so here, are you ready to quit yet?
Not at all. I'm taking everything in.
Bye,
Okay.
everybody.
Okay.
Happy
Bye, everybody.
Thanksgiving.
Bye-bye.
Happy
Thank you.
Thanksgiving, yes.
Have a good
Yeah,
weekend. Happy
Thanksgiving,
Thanksgiving,
everybody.
everyone.